said Mrs. Cockle. Phew, said Mr. Cockle. Phew, said Gran Rowty, and phew, said Robin and Rosie, both together. Well, that's all the furniture in its proper place, said Mr. Cockle. And I reckon we've earned a rest, right, Mrs. Rowty?
Oh, I'll say, Mr. Cockle, even poor old Teddy looks worn out, Rosie.
Said Rosie. I think he's asleep. And they all said, phew, again, once or twice. Then all at once, Robin said, Mummy? Yes, Robin? Now that we've properly removed, is this a guest home? A guest house? Well, and Helen Cockle laughed, not until we've made it look nicer than this. And we'll have to have people staying here on holiday, said Mr. Cockle.
And you'll have to have a name for it,
said Gran Rowty. That made Mr. Cockle sit up. Gosh, Helen, he said, I'd forgotten all about a name. So had I, said Mrs. Cockle.
Well, all the other little hotels and that are called something. Place next door is called Pine Villa.
How about calling our guest house High Tide because it's near the sea, said Christopher Cockle. But Mrs. Cockle didn't think that was a good idea. People might think it's so near the sea that the water comes into the house at high tide, she laughed. How about calling it the Anchor because it's near to the harbour where all the boats are? But Gran Rowty didn't think that was a good idea.
There's a little hotel to the side of the village that's already called the Anchor, she said. You'd have folk going to the wrong place.
Oh dear, said Mrs. Cockle. Oh dear, said Mr. Cockle.
Oh dear,
said Robin and Rosie together. The three grown-ups laughed at that. You don't have to worry about it, said their mother. We'll think of something. Why don't you go into the garden and play while we get on in here?
Oh, yes,
said Robin and Rosie.
What shall we do?
Asked Rosie. Let's go and see if Mr. Ship's in his yard, said Robin, and Rosie agreed.
Mr. Ship,
called Robin.
Mr. Ship.
Hello, my dears,
called Mr. Ship, but they couldn't see him.
Hello,
he called again. Perhaps he's under his boat again, said Rosie.
Mr. Ship. Mr. Ship.
hello, I'm up here.
Robin and Rosie looked up, and there he was on top of his old boat.
Hang on,
he called.
I'm coming down.
Were you going to sail it round the world today, Mr. Shipham? Asked Robin.
Well, not before lunch,
smiled the old man.
And do call me Mr. Ship, like everyone else does.
Anyway, Rosie chipped in, he couldn't sail it round the world because it's got holes in it. Well, he could have mended it, said Robin. No, he couldn't. Yes, he could.
No, no, no,
said Mr. Ship.
Anyone who fights in my yard gets nothing to eat for a week but Ship's biscuits.
They knew he didn't mean it, but they stopped arguing anyway. And then Rosie asked Mr. Ship, will it sail one day, Mr. Ship?
Oh, she certainly will, my dear, she certainly will,
said Mr. Ship.
I was doing a bit of work on her bows when you turned up.
The bows? said Rosie.
Don't you know where the bows are?
said the old sailor.
Why, the bow on a boat is the front of the boat, the sharp end. There, that's the bows.
Oh, I see, Mr. Ship, said Robin. And what's the back of the boat called?
Oh, that's the stern. Bow, and stern.
Bow and stern, said Rosie. I see.
Then, bless my barnacles, said Mr. Ship. I'm forgetting my promise.
What's that, Mr. Ship?
Well, last time I saw you, I said I'd introduce you to a friend of mine with long ears who eats carrots.
Oh,
said Robin and Rosie, both together again. And he lives in a sort of house over here. The sort of house was a little shed with a funny door in two halves. The top of the door was open, and the bottom half was closed. Fury, called Mr. Ship. Come on, Fury.
Who's Fury?
Asked Robin. Oh, you'll see. Fury, come on. There was a sort of blowing and rustling from the back of the shed, and then a big, gentle, hairy face was poked out of the open half of the door.
A horse,
said Rosie. A donkey, said Mr. Ship. A donkey called Fury.
He doesn't look like a Fury,
said Robin. He don't behave like a Fury either, said Mr. Ship. I think he was called that as a little joke because he's so gentle. You just try stroking his nose. They did, and Fury loved it.
Is he your donkey, Mr. Ship?
Asked Rosie. No, he just lives in my yard. He belongs to a man called Arthur Fingal, and he gives rides to the children on the beach. And I don't know why he isn't there today. But I know someone who's going to be on the beach this afternoon.
Oh,
said Rosie.
who?
Well, if it's all right with your mum and dad, you are, 'cause I'm going to take you.
Oh,
said Robin and Rosie both together. And, said the old man, I've got something here that you need to have with you on the beach. There, he said. You can't live at the seaside and not have a bucket and spade. Seaside and buckets and spades goes together.
gosh, thank you,
said Robin and Rosie together. And then Rosie said,
Do seasides and buckets and spades always go together?
Always, said Mr. Ship.
Well then, said Rosie, that's what we could call our guest house.
Said Mr. Ship. It'd certainly be different.
Come on, said Robin. Let's tell Mummy and Daddy.
They got to the back door in a rush, just as Mr. and Mrs. Cockle were coming to look for them.
Mummy, we've seen a donkey called Fury. And Mr. Ship's boat's going to sail around the world, and he's going to take us to the beach. And he's given us a bucket and spade each. And that's what we could call our guest house. The bucket and spade.
The bucket and spade, said Mr. and Mrs. Cockle, both together. What a nice idea. Shall we? Said Mrs. Cockle.
Yes,
said Mrs. Cockle and Mr. Cockle and Robin and Rosie all together. And they all went and had their lunch in the bucket and spade guest house.